You know that feeling. A single moment when the world rearranges itself around the truth you were never supposed to see. When something small cracks, and behind it, a long, patient shadow reveals itself. This is not about revenge born of heat. These are cold, considered reckonings, the kind that ripen quietly, then land with a quiet, devastating clarity. Tonight, you will meet 5 people who waited. 5 ordinary lives shaped by betrayal, by theft, by cruelty, until the scales no longer tipped. I promise you this, you will not be invited to cheer. You will be asked for 40 minutes to feel, to lean in as bitterness and justice braid together. To ask yourself, when does justice become something else? And are any of us prepared to answer for what we've done? Throughout the stories, you'll see the small details that matter. A ledger with a smudge of coffee, a childhood photograph left in a wallet, an unanswered phone call marked with the wrong name. Those details are the keys. We begin. Revenge and justice are often spoken of as if they're synonyms. They are not. Justice is supposed to be measured, public, impartial. Revenge is private. It is a ledger kept in the dark. Ledger lines added at night, accounted only by the person who felt wronged. When official avenues fail, or the wound is too intimate for a courtroom, people write their own bookkeeping. Some ways of balancing the books are ugly. Some are almost elegant. Watch for the moments when the wronged stop pleading and begin to plan. Notice how they choose to wait. Coldness is not absence of feeling. It is patience shaped into purpose. Our first story is small and precise, like a pair of scissors. Marta Rivera had been a librarian for 24 years. She loved the smell of old paper, the hush between the stacks, the tiny eccentricities of readers who lingered over footnotes. Quiet, reliable. A woman who could remember the ISBN for a book she'd shelved 10 years ago, but who never remembered to complain. Her life, quietly arranged, was not immune to the world's sharp corners. Her sister, Eliza, moved in during a hard winter. Eliza was charming in a way that made others think she was fragile. She had a smile that lit up dark rooms and an appetite for other people's good fortune. For a while, Marta covered the rent and helped with job applications. She believed, because she loved, that kin ought to be sheltered. Eliza repaid her in stories. "I'll get on my feet," she would say. "I'll pay you back." She never did. Instead, small red flags accumulated. Unexplained withdrawals from their joint account, a new phone line in Eliza's name, and the credit card that appeared in Marta's mailbox with her name, but a balance that should have been Eliza's.
I kept thinking I was missing something. I kept saying, maybe she forgot. Maybe I should have asked more. I thought family was stronger than this.
Marta tried to fix it the way people are taught to. She confronted Eliza, she called the bank, she put the receipts in a folder. The answers were half answers. Apologies that slid away like oil, promises to make it right. 2 years of apologies, no payments. And then Marta discovered something else. Her own name on documents she had never signed, a shell company siphoning small amounts from multiple accounts tied to her identity. Fraud, neatly packaged. The bank shrugged. The local authorities said the evidence was insufficient. Eliza continued to smile. So Marta did what she knew best. She became meticulous. The ledger turned into a workbench. She began to track everything: dates, amounts, who was where. She taught herself where the papers would hide, in corporate filings, in obscure county records, under the names of LLCs meant to look like garbage. She learned patience. Her revenge was not a scream. It was a series of small surgical losses applied to the structure that supported Eliza's life. She didn't confront, she dismantled. A vendor was quietly notified that Eliza's company had misrepresented inventory. A compliance audit followed. A landlord, informed of an unregistered sublease, moved to evict an imaginary tenant. Marta made a few anonymous calls, sent a few carefully worded emails, and waited. But the key was the ledger. Every episode of fraud Marta uncovered she filed away and then turned over to an investigator she hired under a false name. She fed him breadcrumbs, documents, and the ledger's careful arithmetic. Small advantages accumulated. A bank froze an account. A courier delivery never arrived. Eliza's credit, once a bright flame, receded. One morning, Eliza arrived at a boutique she couldn't afford. Her card was declined. Not a dramatic public moment, not an arrest, just a slow erosion. Supplier relationships dissolved, the landlord changed his tone, and friends stopped defending her when postponed promises became an ugly pattern. Her world became a series of doors closing.
I didn't want her to be ruined. I wanted the debt to be paid. I wanted her to know what it felt like to watch doors close.
Revenge, in Marta's hands, was arithmetic and endurance. It was the silence of a ledger that refused to be ignored. In the end, Eliza wrote Marta a long, bitter letter, apologies that were also excuses. Marta read it, folded it, and put it in the ledger. She never sent it. She had her payment. Sometimes bitter justice looks like balance restored, not fireworks. Marta returned to the stacks, her life slightly altered but whole. The ledger stayed hidden in a drawer because some books are better left unread. John Malick grew up in a house big enough to swallow a child's voice. His father, a man of money and brittle manners, favored show over substance. John learned early that the house had rules he would never be taught: which doorways to avoid, which relatives to flatter, which truths to swallow.
Remember, your name is everything. Keep it clean.
When John's father died, the family gathered like vultures in pressed suits. The will was read. The house would go to someone named, on paper, as a nephew. Documents were produced that suggested John had been estranged, that he'd been given a trust years ago as a teenager. But the numbers didn't add up. The so-called nephew, a smooth man named Arthur, looked menacingly casual as he signed papers and shook hands. John was stunned. There were signatures on documents he had never seen, dates that coincided with nights he remembered being with his father, bottles of whiskey and the scratch of a pen. And yet the legal system, the land of fees, fine print, and gatekeepers, closed quietly around him. Investigation uncovered notarized pages, forgeries that had been skillfully executed. The probate court accepted them. The house, the businesses, the name, gone. But John was patient in a different way. He knew the house built itself from people as much as bricks. Arthur's life depended on the network: drivers, accountants, administrators who liked being well paid and not asked difficult questions. John started small. He returned to the city, took a job that paid little and required quiet. He learned to listen. He learned the names of Arthur's couriers. He listened for the weak seams. He learned that Arthur relied on an offshore accountant who used a particular eagle-printed template. He learned the name of the company that laundered invoices for Arthur's businesses. He learned which of Arthur's old friends kept pockets notched with cash. One by one, John opened small doors. A whistleblower, an accountant with a conscience, an old friend grudgingly offered a little help.
Employee, nervous. You sure you want to go digging? People get mean when you go after their money. John, quiet. I'm not asking for their money. I want what was mine, and the truth.
John gathered proof, forged signatures, emails shoved through unsecured servers, a pattern of transfers that formed a map. But legal proof required juries and witnesses. John turned to spectacle. He did not want to burn Arthur in public. He wanted the public to look. At a charity gala where Arthur was to be honored, John arranged for a small dossier to be placed in a journalist's hand. The dossier contained a timeline, copies of forged documents, and a simple, human note. This man took my childhood home. The press asked questions. The press does not punish. It corrodes reputation. Arthur's sponsors pulled away. His awards committee delayed. Important donors received quiet letters asking for clarity. Arthur fought. He hired lawyers. He denied. He threatened. But reputations, once scored in the press, are like plaster cracked by the years. They don't hold moisture the same way. A bank froze accounts pending inquiry. The charity returned its donation with apologies. Arthur's social calendar, once brilliant, dimmed. Not all deeds were returned. The law moved only so fast. But Arthur's access evaporated. Contractors refused to take his calls. The trust that had funneled funds dried up. When a formal investigation was finally opened, it was John's dossiers that provided the thread detectives followed. In the end, Arthur was charged with multiple counts of fraud. He would spend years unraveling in court, a slow undoing.
I never wanted to see him suffer. I wanted the truth in the light. Watching him lose the things he claimed to build. Watching the world finally hold him accountable. That was the only way I could feel my childhood return.
He did not get the house back. He did get his name cleared, and in the city where shadows had once swallowed his voice, people now used his name with respect. Sometimes bitter justice is not a thing returned, but a story reclaimed. Dr. Anya Patel had hands that saved lives. She was precise in the operating theater and tender in her appointments. Her reputation was built from decades of steady work and small acts of excellence. A careful incision, a patient who slept that night because of her bedside manner. Her research partner, a charismatic man named Dr. Raymond Hale, had a different talent, the kind that moves faster in boardrooms and funding committees. He was persuasive, magnetic, and he knew how to turn a grant application into a headline. Together, they published a paper that promised to revolutionize a treatment. The team succeeded, but when the awards came, Raymond took credit he hadn't earned. He began to present their joint work as his alone, to strip Anya's name from slide decks, to talk over her in interviews.
Anya, firm. Raymond, the paper is ours. You know my work is here. Raymond, smile thinning. You're being sensitive. This is how science gets done. I pushed the narrative. It was my angle.
Colleagues noticed and mostly looked away. Anya tried the routes she was supposed to take. Emails to ethics committees, requests to journals for correction, recorded conversations. The journals delayed. The committees asked for more time. Funding reviews happen in cycles, and cycles move like glaciers. Anya realized she was in a world that rewarded rhythm and charisma. If she wanted to be heard, she would have to make them pay attention in a way they could not ignore. Her response was surgical in another sense. She devised an experiment, not to harm, but to reveal. Using the same meticulous protocols that had made her a respected surgeon, she documented the exact chain of contributions to the research. Raw notebooks, time-stamped lab entries, cloud backups showing edits, emails that proved co-authorship. The evidence was pristine. She prepared a single, devastating submission. An exposé with primary source proof, delivered to every relevant authority, the journals, the grant agencies, the hospital board, and crucially, a leading investigative science reporter known for exposing misconduct. The fallout was not dramatic theater. It was patient and inexorable. The journals retracted articles that had misattributed authorship. Funding partners re-examined grants and demanded repayment. The hospital launched an ethics review. Raymond's calendar of speaking engagements shrank. Invitations disappeared when committees received copies of Anya's files. Raymond tried to fight. He accused her of sabotage. He said she was bitter. He attempted to publish new work with his name large and hers missing. But primary evidence speaks a language nothing else can. As more institutions recognized the truth, his prominence collapsed. The board relieved him of a leadership position pending review. Funders distanced themselves.
I wanted the record to be right more than I wanted him to be punished. When people's work is stolen, the world becomes unjustly smaller for them.
In time, corrections were printed. Anya's authorship was restored, and she was invited to speak, but not with triumphalism. She returned to the operating room, to the tenderness of patients' faces. Often she would think about silence as an instrument. Silence can be a wound, or it can be the calm before justice arrives. Her revenge was a mirror held to a system that preferred charm to rigor. It was private, legal, and contained. It was ultimately about truth. Evelyn Moore taught 6th grade on the 3rd floor of a public school with leaky windows and a staff room that smelled like coffee and chalk dust. She loved the particular miracle of children learning to call the right things by their true names. She was also, quietly, the person families trusted when home life frayed. When a parent, a wealthy developer named Marcus Lyle, decided his son would not abide by the rules, skipping homework, humiliating classmates, Evelyn intervened as teachers must. She applied the school's discipline, consulted counselors, worked to keep the classroom safe. Marcus did not like teachers who enforce rules. He was entitled, persuasive, and used to getting his way. He complained to the principal, to the school board, and finally, he used influence to pressure for Evelyn's removal. Complaints piled on. Unsuitable teaching methods. Partial assessment. The principal, fearing budget cuts and donor pressure, placed Evelyn on administrative leave while inquiries were made. The community rallied. Parents wrote letters. The students drew pictures and left them on Evelyn's desk, but the bureaucracy moved like concrete. Evelyn watched, stunned, as the people she protected were threatened by the power of someone who could buy influence. The inquiry found procedural missteps. The school needed clearer notes, better forms. Evelyn had made none of the horrors Marcus alleged, but the process rewarded an aggressive hand backed by money. What can a teacher do when the institution designed to protect children bends to wealth? Evelyn took a measure known to many teachers. She prepared her students, not by teaching them to hate, but by teaching them to remember in ways that could not be easily erased. She turned classroom assignments into documentation. She had students create portfolios, drawings, recorded readings, signed reflections about teamwork and respect. Each piece was dated, each student's voice preserved. She taught them to write honest observations about the ways Marcus's son behaved and how the class responded.
Miss Evelyn, I recorded what happened at recess like you said.
She collected testimonies. Then she did the brave thing many do not. She asked for help beyond the school. Evelyn worked with a local advocacy group that assisted with documentation in disciplinary matters. They offered legal forms and a journalist who would listen if presented with a clear, child-protected dossier. The campaign that followed was not about spectacle. It was about truth, the children's voices, the dated portfolios, the signed notes. When the school board convened, Evelyn presented the materials calmly. She let the students speak with guardians present. The district, fearing scrutiny and a lawsuit, opened a formal investigation into the handling of the matter by the principal and the way the complaint had been fast-tracked. Marcus's influence, which had once been a hammer, became a liability. Donors received inquiries. The developer's public image suffered when a profile piece questioned his involvement and motives. The school reversed some decisions. Evelyn was restored, not with fanfare, but by the ugly truth of documentation and the slow, patient insistence of children who remembered. Marcus's son was reassigned, and Marcus found that influence sometimes repels scrutiny rather than inviting it.
I wanted my class to know that when someone uses power, the remedy is to keep records and to tell the truth, even if your voice feels small. Children's memory can be justice.
Her revenge was a classroom full of testimony, small voices made sturdy by care. It was a lesson that lasted far beyond a single term. Michael Reyes had been a devoted son, the kind who sliced fruit for his mother and brought her medicine on Thursdays. His mother, Rosa, had worked nights and raised him with a steady, stern love. When Rosa began to show signs of cognitive decline, Michael did what sons do. He arranged care. He hired an agency, interviewed aides, and, when he could, visited every day. One caregiver, a woman named Liana, arrived with a warm smile and practiced gentleness. But over months, things changed. Medication counts didn't match. Cash was missing from Rosa's purse. A small necklace Rosa cherished vanished. Rosa's bank showed withdrawals on days Michael knew he had been at work. Michael confronted the agency. They apologized and promised more oversight. The truth, however, was a slow drip. Each apology came with a new absence. Michael recorded phone calls. He installed a small camera in the common room, not to spy on Rosa's privacy, but to protect her safety. In the footage, he found the truth. Liana, with unhurried ease, took the necklace, pocketed pills, and sent text messages in which she lied about the cash. When Michael showed the agency, they acted surprised and then slow. The police were polite but pressured for direct, undeniable proof. Michael had the footage. The agency had contracts. The police required statements. Time passed. He could have sought the simple satisfaction of a public confrontation. He could have screamed in the agency's lobby and waited for cameras to do the work. Instead, Michael thought of his mother's small dignity and the hollowness of spectacle. His revenge would be about removing the mechanism that allowed theft to continue. He traced Liana's pattern across multiple clients. He found she worked through a number of small agencies, each lax in screening. He made careful calls, posing as a potential employer, and documented a trail of references that did not check out. He compiled a dossier and brought it to a regulatory board that oversaw caregiver licensing. He brought legal counsel and pressed for revocation of Liana's license. He also worked with a local investigative reporter to expose the ways certain agencies tolerated turnover as a cost of doing business. The result was not theatrical. Liana lost her license. Several agencies that had cut corners were fined and required to implement stricter checks. A network of shady operations collapsed when their trustworthiness was tested. Rosa's missing jewelry was recovered when one of Liana's buyers tried to sell it, unaware that the item was flagged in a safety network Michael had alerted. The buyer called the police and returned the piece. The necklace fit around Rosa's neck again, not flashy, but exactly what it had always been. A small thing that belonged to her.
Seeing my mother wear it again, I couldn't say everyone should do what I did, but I could not stand by. I could not let her be diminished.
Michael's revenge was a network collapsed by documentation and persistence. It was a return of small things, a necklace, a stolen dignity, a safer system for others. Bitter? Yes. Necessary? He believed so. We have watched 5 lives unfold across quiet kitchens, hospital hallways, and schoolrooms. Each person took a shape of revenge that suited their pain: ledger, dossier, exposure, testimony, and regulation. None of these endings was cinematic in the way movies promise. No explosive confrontations or blood-streaked catharsis. Instead, each tale shows how patience and acute attention can right things when other systems fail. But remember this: when vengeance becomes a policy, when we begin to measure each injury and assign tit for tat, there is a cost. Revenge can heal, yes, but it can also hollow. It is easy to mistake the satisfaction of a returned thing for the restoration of the self. These stories are not endorsements of cruelty. They are human reports of what happens when official channels are slow, corrupt, or inattentive. They show how ordinary people find extraordinary resilience. If there is a common thread, it is this: dignity. Each act of bitter justice reclaimed something intangible as much as tangible. A name, a childhood, authorship, a classroom's safety, a mother's jewelry. The best answer to theft and betrayal is not always punishment. Sometimes it is truth. Sometimes it is the return of what was taken. Sometimes it is the quiet restoration that allows a life to continue. Thank you for staying with these stories. If one touched you, share it carefully. These are true to the textures of people's lives, and someone you know may have a ledger of their own. Subscribe if you want more stories that focus on the human heart in the face of cold choices. And remember, justice is complicated, and so are we.
Martha, soft wounded. I kept thinking I was missing something. Maybe she forgot. John, quiet. I'm not asking for their money. I want what was mine and the truth. Anya, steady. I wanted the record to be right more than I wanted him to be punished. Evelyn, gentle. I wanted my class to know to keep records and to tell the truth, even if small. Michael, choked. Seeing my mother wear it again, I couldn't stand by.
If any story is inspired by a real person, anonymize and change identifying details. Do not give step-by-step instructions for wrongdoing. The scripts here show patterns and moral choices, not how to commit crimes. Provide the narration script as a single voiceover file. Include separate files for B-roll shot list, subtitles, and chapter timestamps. Consider chapter markers at each story start for YouTube, with timestamps provided above.